Your time is up, white people. So declared an economic freedom fighter MP of the South African Parliament, according to local reports upon news that the seizure of white South African land without compensation will go ahead in March 2019. Any criticism of the redistribution of land to black South Africans, including criticisms given by US President Donald Trump, is dismissed as racist by South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa. And all of this is taking place in the shadow of some white South African farmers calling for an independent nation for their people, mostly white Afrikaners, as they believe that their way of life is now at risk. On the 8th of December, the South African National Assembly, by a margin of 183 to 77, approved a proposal that will change the country's constitution and will allow it to confiscate land owned by white South Africans and redistribute it to black South Africans without compensation. That is, farmers in South Africa will have their land taken away from them without any monetary compensation because of the color of their skin being white, and it will be given to other South Africans because their skin color is black. With the approval of the change in constitution to allow the land grabs against white farmers, the nation's lawmakers are now in the process of setting up a committee that will help draw up a bill to carry out the expropriation without compensation. Critics have said the move could cripple the nation's economy in a similar way to that of Zimbabwe, that also expropriated white-owned farms, and it plunged the country into chaos and hyperinflation, and in the end to the status of that of a failed state in a very short amount of time. However, according to many of the members of the African National Congress, as well as the Marxist-leaning Economic Freedom Fighters Party, headed by one Julius Malema, who has previously stated that we have not called for the killing of white people, at least for now. He also said that he could not guarantee what would happen in the future.
I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I'm saying to you, we have not called for the killing of white people, at least for now. I can't guarantee the future.
Yeah, but I mean, you'd understand somebody watching that, especially as it gets shared on Twitter, they freak out. It sounds like a genocidal call.
Cry babies. Cry babies.
I'm not calling for the slaughter of white people, at least for now.
I can't give you a guarantee of the future.
Many of the members of the government say that this is the only way to address the wealth gap between black and white South Africans, while other members of the government have said the move undermines South Africa's position as a democratic state and that this was a populist agenda being implemented by the ruling party. For his part, US President Donald Trump has been a vocal critic of the plan. And in response, Ramaphosa has brushed off all concerns that people have in a recent anti-Trump tirade that any critics to the land grab against white farmers are racist. What is clear is that this is a purely racist action. It is quite literally the theft from some South Africans who happen to have white skin of their property and is being handed over to other people with black skin who also happen to be South African. It is explicitly racist. I am of the opinion, however, that this is not only an issue of race, but an expression of the deeply rooted Marxist ideology of radical social justice manifest in South Africa. This ideology has seen its tentacles seep into everything from Hollywood to robotic brothels, and across oceans from Australasia and Europe all the way down to South Africa. This legalized theft in South Africa is predicated on increasing the wealth of blacks so as to make them equally wealthy as whites economically, and this is what its backers espouse. However, such a radical action would never have taken place even 10 short years ago in South Africa, nor would it be accepted as anything other than what it is, deeply racist by the global community. The difference is, as stated, the increasing power of radical Marxist social justice ideology, especially in media and academia. The idea of radical equality is what is being proposed. The vast majority of blacks are no worse off economically than they were under apartheid. Indeed, there is absolutely no institutional discrimination against blacks in South Africa today. In fact, the majority is on the receiving end of many laws that govern affirmative action in employment contracts and in business. What radical social justice, when applied to South Africa in the populist manner as predicated by the ANC and the EEF, is not to make blacks wealthier, but to make whites equally poor. In fact, the massive growth in poverty of working class whites, mostly Afrikaners in South Africa, has led to the surge in white squatter townships across the country. And there are no laws to help them, only laws that discriminate against them because of the color of their skin. This is the result of affirmative action laws that discriminate against the white minority in favor of the black majority, and have made it difficult for whites to secure work as the laws are aimed at providing blacks a greater share of the economy. Still, even with the massive growth in poverty and many whites now living in shanty towns and in squalor, any suggestion that whites are suffering as a group has, according to The Independent, been met with an angry backlash among black South Africans as they believe not all whites are as poor as blacks. Not yet, it would seem in their minds, is there equality in failure, poverty, and misery. And this is the key takeaway. Social justice is never about equality of opportunity, but equality of outcome. And South Africa has become very infected with this ideology in almost everything, including academia, where it is now being pushed to what is called decolonize academia, or to eliminate the legacy of European thought and culture in education. The science departments have struggled to explain how this can be accomplished, but they suggest not only an increase in black scientists, but of what they call a racial transformation. Like in Zimbabwe, Marxist jingoism about equality is about creating the circumstances where everyone is equal. If that means being equally poor, so be it, as it usually does. Just look at Venezuela. South Africa, under these conditions, is setting itself up to be just another failed sub-Saharan nation with a kleptocracy that works in favor of a small minority at the top of the economic food chain with little in the way of concern for the teeming masses below. The situation currently has become so intolerable for many people in the country that there are now calls by many white South African farmers for an independent homeland where they can be free to create their own destiny. These calls have been spurred on by not only the impending theft of their land by the government, but also the appalling, vicious, and brutal murders of scores of farmers across the country. On that note, Valerie Bleifeld, a provincial leader of the National Conservative Party, has said on a Facebook video that she wanted Donald Trump to intervene on behalf of white farmers in South Africa. She also said that white farmers were not only the victims of the crisis, but that black farmers and farm workers were also being targeted. The leader of the NCP, Willie Khaledi, also said that he wanted an independent country for white Afrikaners, as he believes that their way of life was at risk. We want to get out of the unity state. We want to have a state of our own. We want independence, he said. He added, we want self-determination implemented in South Africa, and we as the NCP are currently leading the way towards self-determination for our people in a legal way. And it is of note that 2018 marks the second year of Black Monday protests that are held to raise awareness about the murders of white farmers in South Africa. Given the divisive nature of the looming appropriation of white-owned land without compensation, I wish the nation well. The success of any sub-Saharan nation is critical in changing the dynamics in what is perhaps the most dysfunctional region on the planet. I fear, however, should this legalized theft of minority citizens' property for the benefit of the majority go ahead, which it looks almost certain that it will, the ramifications could be extreme. Social justice-driven Marxism has a track record of failure. Zimbabwe is a very good example of what the probable outcome for South Africa will be after it follows this course of action. Everything from there on in will be subject to uncertainty, bank loans, investment, contracts. Everything is tied back to property rights. And without clearly defined property rights, all South Africans, both black and white, at least the majority of which, are most likely going to suffer, and suffer greatly. Also to consider is that this discriminatory redistribution of property could also be the foreshadowing of how other white populations could be treated as they too become minorities in their own countries. Radical calls for social justice in Canada, Australia, Sweden, the UK, and the confiscation of property without compensation, or calls for affirmative action politics for the majority, are all easily implemented once the demographics of a democratic nation changes. That's why what is happening in South Africa today and the now legalized theft of one group of people's property based on their skin color should concern everyone, no matter what race, color, or creed you are. Thanks for watching. If you liked this material, please consider subscribing. Also follow Black Pigeon on the usual social media. Till next time.
All right there, everyone. South Africa's High Court has cleared the way for the government to expropriate white-owned farmland. That is what we'll be talking about on today's video. If this is your first time here, a very warm welcome to you. I post 2 videos a day analyzing current events in light of conservative trends. So let me encourage you to smack that bell and subscribe button. We are on our way to 100,000 subscribers, and it'd be an absolute privilege to have you as one of them. All right, so Reuters is reporting that South Africa's High Court has officially cleared the way for the government to begin the process of mass land seizures from white farmers. Specifically, the High Court rejected a legal challenge by a group known as AfriForum, which is a legal group representing a number of white farmers, wherein they challenged the legality of the land grab, citing inconsistencies in a number of committee procedures and reports that recommended the change to the South African constitution that would in fact allow the government to expropriate, to take land currently owned by white farmers and redistribute it back to the black population. It's a thoroughly racially charged action undertaken by the African National Congress there. And unfortunately, it is now officially legal. The High Court there rejected the legal challenge, and in so doing has in fact given the government the green light to begin expropriations as soon as the Constitution is formally changed. Now, just so that we're all clear on this, this measure to take land away forcibly from white farmers without any compensation was passed in the South African Congress through the influence of the black Marxist leader Julius Malema, who's risen as a serious presidential contender for next year's national election. Malema is a radical leftist populist who's been calling for the expropriation of white-owned farmland to be returned, as he puts it, to black Africans. He's infamous for using the most violent language imaginable, even threatening to begin the process of indiscriminately killing white people, all in the name of a kind of ethnic cleansing from within the confines of South Africa. And so as a way of countering the effects and political momentum of Malema, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has made land expropriation, well, frankly, central now to his administration's agenda. He's pledged to return the lands owned by white farmers since the 1600s back to the black citizens of the country, since, after all, the land was taken under colonialism and apartheid. So, in effect, you took the land from us, now we're taking it back from you, and that's that. Now, of course, no white farmer that currently owns any land has taken that land from anyone. They own it fair and square, as it were. What you have operating here is group identity theory, cultural Marxist theory that sees individuals as part of irreconcilable racial groups that are in turn treated according to the place, the social status that's been assigned to that minority racial group by a majority racial group. Now, of course, if this was whites doing this to blacks or any other non-white minority group, the entire Western world would be up in arms against this. They'd be calling it racist and neo-fascist and Nazism and denouncing it in the absolute sense, but not here. I don't know if you remember, but when President Trump announced that he had directed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to closely study the South African land farm seizures and expropriations, and indeed the violence and killing of white farmers there in South Africa. When he made that statement, the New York Times came out and said that President Trump, and I'm quoting them, cited false claims of widespread attacks on white farmers in South Africa, close quote. The Kansas City Star accused Trump of racism. Now, the funny part in all this, actually, it's ridiculously sad, but the irony of all of this is that Julius Malema, the radical South African Marxist racist politician, he came out and said bluntly, well, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. We're absolutely expropriating farmland from white farm owners who stole that land from us. That is exactly what we're doing. In fact, while all of our media elite were excoriating our president for his supposed racism, Malema was actually confirming Trump's concerns. He was actually championing the whole notion of the South African government rectifying past injustices committed against blacks by South African whites. And I think it was Tucker Carlson who said it best when addressing the rhetoric of these so-called journalist pieces. He said their rhetoric was nothing short of Orwellian. Because if you think it through, it is now, according to our globalist media liberal elites, it is now racist to oppose racism. I mean, you just have to let that hit you. It's now racist to oppose racism. And so since we can't oppose this racism without being racist, you actually have journalists who comprise our media elite, who our journalists are now defending the African National Congress's actions by referring to their policy of, get this, post-apartheid land reform. Well, does that sound so sophisticated? Post-apartheid land reform, which is being undertaken precisely in order to rectify the past evils of apartheid and the unfair land distribution where over 70% of farmland has been owned by white farmers. And so, according to our elites, it's completely understandable why the idea of nationalizing all of this land is growing in popularity. Did you catch that? I mean, it's perfectly understandable why the idea of stealing the land owned only by those who have a particular skin color is growing in popularity. It's understandable. Even the Reuters piece covering the High Court's decision, even that piece said that land remains what they called a hot-button issue in South Africa because the racial inequality that marked South Africa for so long remains entrenched. Even 2 decades after apartheid was ended, racial inequality remains entrenched because of all the land the black majority were dispossessed of by this white minority. So that continued racial entrenchment makes land ownership a hot-button issue. Not an issue where people are currently being targeted by the government for land expropriation precisely because of the color of their skin. No. That's not what's happening here. What's happening here is it's a hot-button political issue. You know, like taxes, cutting entitlements, austerity measures. Now, I have a question. If you think it through, what's the difference between how these liberal leftists are writing about what's going on in South Africa and what Julius Malema would write? What's the difference? I guess Malema would go so far as to say, as he has, that he isn't advocating the killing off of white people just yet. And when asked whether white people in South Africa were legitimately concerned because of his statements like that, Malema just said they were being crybabies. They're just crybabies. I frankly don't see much of a difference between Malema's blatantly racist politics and those advocated by our journalist and media elite. When all is said and done, and I do think that South Africa is the case of this, we are seeing the dark side of nationalism. I talked about this with Willem Peltzer, who's in South Africa, covers all things from the ground, as it were. Willem has a great YouTube channel that you want to check out that dives deeply into what's going on in post-apartheid South Africa from a nationalist populist perspective. But we talked about this, and that if a multi-ethnic nation's cultural structures have been so weakened by globalism that it can't sustain a renewed civic nationalism, a nationalism around a common set of civic practices, customs, legal proceedings, an economy that together create a kind of meta-culture that contains a number of microcultures and ethnicities, like in Russia. If the basic frames of reference necessary for civic nationalism have been weakened, inevitably the nation's going to collapse into a form of ethno-nationalism, where dominant ethnicity or race becomes synonymous with the national constitution. And I think this is precisely what we're seeing with the rhetoric of Julius Malema, and at least to a certain extent, President Ramaphosa. South Africa is beginning to look more and more like an ethno-state, and whites will be increasingly marginalized from any meaningful participation in public and civic life. And they'll have Western elite liberals to largely thank for that, since they saw what was happening but couldn't understand it apart from their cultural Marxist ideologies, which they ironically share with Julius Malema. So, of course, we'll continue to keep our eye on things. I have a number of videos that have examined the developments going on there in South Africa that I'll link below for you if you're interested in pursuing this more. And, of course, check out Willem Petzer's channel. He's really doing God's work down there. He's an excellent resource in South Africa. But the big takeaway in all of this, a post-globalist age involves the exciting resurgence of civic nationalism all over the world, but it also involves a number of inevitable ethno-states and ethno-nationalisms that are going to leave a number of races and ethnicities disenfranchised in what was once their own countries. A development made all the more tragic by the complicity played by globalism's dying cultural Marxists here in the West.
Hey, what's up guys, it's Ronaldo here. So this video is different than my usual videos because I really am angry. I'm angry at the fact that we have cancerous individuals in South Africa that is inciting war and making gullible people angry at a specific race in this country. Now, 2018 has been a very strange year because for some reason white people in this country are to blame for everything. 2018, not 2017, 16, 15, 14, 2018 specifically is a year in which white people have been targeted constantly by opportunistic individuals that want to make it seem that white people are the sole reason that South Africa is in the state that it's in. Now, anybody with just a basic understanding of what's going on in this country would understand that the people to blame is the ANC government, because they control over R1 trillion in order to deliver services, but they fail to do so. And yet those individuals, the ANC included, would like to blame white monopoly capital for whatever's wrong in this country. Now, Andile Mngxitama, the leader for Black First, Land First, came out and made some amazingly stupid and amazingly concerning statements about white people, in essence declaring war on white people in South Africa. Now, if you don't believe me, take a look at this video.
For each one person that is being killed by the taxi industry, we'll kill 5 white people. For every one black person we'll kill 5 white people. To kill one of us, we'll kill 5 of you. We'll kill the children, we'll kill the women, we'll kill anything that we find on our way. They kill one of us, we kill how many? They kill one of us, we kill how many? They kill one of us, we kill how many whites? We kill the children, we kill the women, we kill their dogs, we kill their cats, we kill anything that comes before us.
Yeah, I don't even know how to respond to that. There's no witty response. There's no saying, well, it's his opinion. That is blatant racism and blatant hate speech right there. And it's clearly a call to incite harm on a specific race in South Africa. And that's basically all I've got to say. Till later, cheers and peace out.
I ask you a quick question? Sure. So you're obviously advocating that we have more refugees. Do you feel the same about the white South African refugees? Should we be inviting them here as well?
No.
Why are you hanging out with your Nazi mate over there?
We're just not doing that.
Did you see that? The second he said white South African, she just like white, go whoa, woo. She starts going, no, 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 no. What if he had said black South African refugees? I mean, if he had said Iraqi, what are you for Iraqi refugees? Yes. Okay, the oh, no, 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 no. Why do white people, Westerners, and Jews hate themselves so much? Why is there so much ethnomasochism from the pale people? And also, look at all these women, too. These women can't wait to roll their eyes at murder. When did women lose their compassion? And the first thing she does to this man, who is just asking questions, the first thing she does is call him a Nazi, despite this being on his head.
At the moment, we're keeping our Nazi down. Today I got my kipper on, so I'm going to be less Nazi. South African farmers, you know, the ones that are getting raped, robbed, murdered.
No, that's ridiculous.
Are you denying what's happening in South Africa?
Yes, I'm denying it.
Why not?
They've got their own country and they stole their land.
So do the
anyway.
Syrians. Really? The white South Africans.
By the way, I also have beef with this whole notion that South Africa was this beautiful land of tribes working together, and then whites, and I don't even like the word white altogether like that, especially with South Africa, came in and murdered them all. The Boers, who didn't like the English and fought a huge war with them, Churchill was on the side of the English, right? They worked with tribes, against tribes. Peter Bota's grandfather, the Botas were the sort of predominant family throughout South African history. He spoke Zulu. He worked with the Zulus. He fought wars on behalf of the Zulus with other tribes in exchange for land. This wasn't just a me want land. Like, pick up a history book. Not unlike North America, where there was a 400-year war with the Indians back and forth. We fought with their tribes, then we fought against different tribes. There was tribal warring before we got there. We just became another tribe fighting and eventually dominated. That's what happened in South Africa. And they made up a racist system called apartheid that very few people are advocating. But that does not totally obliterate the history of South African land, and it obviously doesn't justify torture and genocide. Since when is revenge a legal government policy?
Now that about 30 years old stole land.
No, but that's the history of the place. That's the history.
So they deserve what? A genocide? Can you sign our...
By the way, that's the history of history. You know, Cornwallis, that statue in Halifax that we tried to defend, that is now, I think, removed and in storage somewhere. The argument for that was Halifax was founded on genocide and Cornwallis had scalps. He had a bounty out for Indian scalps. Yes, he did. No evidence, by the way, that worked. I think the only scalps they found were French scalps. But Cornwallis also had bounties on kilts when he was fighting the English. Bounties are just a part of war when you're low on men. Should the Scots be raping and pillaging English villages? Should the Scots be raping English babies? What about the Industrial Revolution with all this child labor? Should they be declaring revenge on the great-grandchildren of the tobacco barons and the textile barons? History was carnage. Life was brutal back then. Yes, Columbus did some terrible things. The Indians down there did terrible things too. History is terrible. Stop taking your 2018 brain where you are so spoiled you wear pajamas on a plane and bring a teddy bear at the age of 26 years old. Stop taking that lifestyle and applying it to the 1500s, the 1600s, the 1800s. Jesus.
South African, white South African, we want to bring in the refugees from South Africa. Are you happy?
I would prefer if the Rohingya came here first.
Why is that? Is that because they're brown? Will you support our petition to bring down the white South Africans? Why is that funny?
I know you.
Do you know me?
I do know you. I like you.
You like me?
I do.
So you're going to sign our petition?
Sure.
Now we have people that will integrate easily. They speak the language, they share similar cultures.
That's
Why
racist.
wouldn't...
Okay, I'm particularly disturbed by all this laughing. A baby was raped. A 1-year-old nailed to a table, crucified, then raped, Then they were shocked to see it was still alive. So they wrapped it in newspapers and burned it. No matter how evil you think that baby's grandparents' history is, can you not laugh? I'm one of the most offensive jokesters around, and that's not even within my universe of caustic humor.
It's actually racist to not accept them because they're white.
No, it's racist. There's no such thing as reverse racism. You should know that.
I didn't say reverse racism. Will you sign a petition for the white South African farmers?
Drop dead, you're a fascist. Drop dead, you're a fascist. Drop dead, you're a fascist.
All right, well, you see where that dialogue is going. Let's talk to Avi now. Avi Yemini, are you there?
I'm here, brother.
How's it going?
God bless.
You know, we were just watching your video, why racist refugee supporters cheer white genocide, and I'm just amazed at how totally oblivious they are to the carnage going on over there. Are you?
No, I'm not shocked. It's you can see these guys live in their own little world where the only people that can be victims of anything have to have some sort of skin color. You can't be white and be a victim of something. It doesn't suit their narrative.
And anyone who says so is a Nazi.
Oh, yeah. Including
a guy with a yarmulke on his head.
Tomorrow, there's going to be a counter-protest to me handing in a petition for the South Africa. We've got 50,000 signatures. And Antifa's holding a rally, a counter-protest to me handing in that petition to the government, calling me a white supremacist neo-Nazi, the brown Jew.
But this is disturbing because it's considered white supremacy to oppose not just like they call it land reformation and all this reclaiming land crap. The carnage, when we actually look it up and talk to people who were there, is so disturbing that I have trouble describing it on my show because it becomes too gory.
Yeah, it's like I've spoken to a few victims. In fact, just before I got on with you, I was speaking to a widow that her husband was shot in the head in front of her and her child, and her daughter's been diagnosed with PTSD. And I said to her, I asked her, what would you say to the Australians that I'll go to a pro-refugee rally and they will deny that this is happening in South Africa? She just says to me, tell them to come. They're welcome.
No.
To see it for themselves.
No, I'm not going near South Africa. You know, Katie Hopkins was just there. She was detained on the way back. Lauren Southern was just there, and she's sitting with a journalist who's telling her a hit list of journalists that they feel are racist, which down there means criticizes the ANC for advocating this slaughter. It's a really, really dangerous place for anyone to be, especially foreigners.
Well, the only other places that I can think of that talked about expropriation without compensation was, as a Jew, what comes to mind for me is Nazi Germany.
Right.
So it is a worry, and that ended in a genocide as well. So the idea that it's not happening there is garbage. You just need to, if you care and you speak to a few people that live there, you will find out that it is happening and it is for real. And you know, I live in a community here where there are lots of South African Jews that tell me that it's happening for real. And they say, look, everybody in South Africa, anyone who's white is a target. But the farmers, and you just have to look at the statistics, they are on a hit list. They are, and the government kind of makes it okay.
Yeah, it's definitely advocated by the government. But the thing that disturbs me, too, is we hear about genocides all over the world. We hear about slaughters. We hear about Boko Haram, and we're all horrified. We hear about the dogs in China being killed in Yulin, and we want to have marches and movies and cry about it and wear T-shirts. But then you hear about, say, Christians being slaughtered in northern Iraq, and it's just a deafening silence. And I've noticed this with Jews, this sort of white self-hatred, Jews also have in droves, even in Israel. When I was in Tel Aviv, I got the same kind of, we're so horrible, we've done such terrible things. And
that's because you were in Tel Aviv.
What?
You have to go out of Tel Aviv. That's because you were in Tel Aviv. Outside of Tel Aviv, I had an argument in Tel Aviv with in Tel Aviv they're a little bit more, they like to think they're liberal, they're very leftist, they're regressives, and she tried to convince me that the entire Israel hates Donald Trump. I said to her, listen, nobody here really knows who I am. And I walked around the entire country with a microphone. And I asked everybody what they think about Donald Trump. Your leftists in Israel or your more liberals, their response was, I love his foreign policy, but he's mad. That was as bad as it got. Besides in Tel Aviv. In Tel Aviv, they claim that no one in their right mind anywhere in Israel will like Trump. But he's loved. He's loved.
I don't know. I had a different experience. Even in Jerusalem, I went all over the country, and I got a lot of hatred for the wall, which the wall is my favorite thing about Israel. And I find there's this apologetic and my argument is about to be that I think it's a white thing. I consider Jews white, obviously, and I think there's something about Jews and whites where there's a ethno-masochism. There's self-hatred in their DNA.
I think you are hanging around the wrong parts of Israel or the wrong people of Israel. If you talk to, I served in the Golani Brigade. Anybody, and we're all, it's known for its Arab Jews, and everybody loves the wall. Everybody loves Trump. Everybody seems to have their head screwed on straight, and they're looking at the world with the right lens. They have no guilt. I know in the Jewish community where I come from here in Melbourne, Australia, they have guilt, and they live in this world where they believe that we should accept multiculturalism for the sake of multiculturalism. And if you're against bringing in immigrants, you're a disgrace to their grandparents who came here after the Holocaust. So we somehow owe it to the rest of the world to be able to come into Australia because a lot of this community was built on the back of Holocaust survivors, and they made something of themselves. But they compare it. I just find it astounding that they're comparing the Holocaust survivors to either tribal African immigrants or Islamists or different sects of Islam that just are coming here and they're coming with absolutely conflicting cultures, as opposed to what the Jews after the Holocaust, they wanted to work hard, they were thriving before the Holocaust, they came back here and they worked their asses off and built themselves empires. You're not seeing that from the immigrants today, but somehow I'm the bigot or I'm the racist because I dare say that, no, we shouldn't hold that guilt. My grandparents from my father's side also escaped the Holocaust. I'm actually half Russian Polish. Nobody knows that. I'm half Russian Polish. My mum's Yemen. And
we just debuted that fact here on this show.
There we go. But I don't look the Russian Polish part. But the thing is, you got to look at things with your head instead of your bleeding heart. And in my community, in the Jewish community here, at least the establishment here, they like to push these agendas where I believe it comes from a guilt, that we owe something because we come from a history of Holocaust survivor and a persecution background. And I just think that keep importing these same people, we're going to end up in the same place we were before. We're just going to have. Well,
you say the post World War II Jews, the Holocaust fleeing Jews, assimilated into Australia because they had the same mentality, and that's the exact same with these farmers. The South African farmers would adapt beautifully. I remember Pat Buchanan got in trouble for saying who would adapt better into British society, 1,000 Englishmen or 1,000 Zulus. No one could prove him wrong. They just didn't like it. But you brought up something that I think is kind of the crux of the argument here. The notion of a sad group of a family in rags and their little baby or their colicky baby coming over on a boat and toiling away. It's a beautiful concept. It sounds nice. But if you're, say, not a uninformed mom, then you go, wait a minute, what if that group is wildly intolerant of other groups? And we see this with Jews in Paris, where you wear a yarmulke around northern Paris and you get nothing but juif go home and they get spat on, they get called dogs.
And then just look, there was, 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago, an 85-year-old Holocaust survivor who survived the horrors of the Holocaust, but she fell to the Islamization of France. She died at the hands of an Islamist after everything she'd been through. And in Australia, you see it as well now. We imported, right now we have 200,000 South Africans here currently. They're not represented in our crime stats and they're not represented in our welfare stats. We've got about 27,000, I think, South Sudanese here. They represent, so they're 0.1% of Melbourne, my city. They represent 8.6% of our violent crime. They represent 40 or 50% of them are on welfare. And that's above, that's past the 5 year, before 5 years, there's 80% on welfare. Most of them don't get jobs. They basically come here and they leech off our system and we owe them everything and then they rob us and they rape us. So it just seems that the petition that I brought up was to ask the government that let's look at the next year, the 18 to 19 year, and let's allocate 80% of our humanitarian immigration intake, which would be about 16,000. Let's allocate that to white South African farmers that we know will integrate. They speak our language. We know they work hard. They want to make a life of themselves.
Share the religion. Share the whole concept of tolerance.
Exactly. These are people that will fit in and help build our nation instead of rob and rape it. But no, you're a bigot because you think with your head.
Yeah, well, your immigration policy used to be the best thing about that island, and it seems to be slowly being chipped away.
Yep.
By political correctness.
Unfortunately, for us liberals, our conservative government has turned leftist. So
right. All right, last question.
We're hoping for better days.
I'm watching this video, and I'm particularly disturbed by the number of women who are laughing at you, calling you a Nazi, and laughing at the horrific torture and murder of farmers in South Africa. I mean, I think it starts out where women go with feelings first and then facts and all that second. But It's gone so far with that we have women scoffing at genocide and laughing at babies that are raped to death.
Couldn't believe it. That was the only part that shocked me. Literally when I would ask him about saving the lives, and these are people that are meant to be, humanitarian activists. These are people that care about people so much that they're willing to take to the streets on a weekend by the thousands. And then you ask them about one group that you're hearing the stories, and they're hearing the stories. We're getting them here in Australia at the moment. We're hearing the stories of people being tortured for 9 hours, raped in front of their husband, then the husband
boiled
killed,
children, boiled alive.
We're hearing the most horrific and barbaric acts, and their response is to laugh at me because I'm considering the idea of I'm here.
Unbelievable. Very disturbing. Well, I think the solution to all of this is to stop negotiating with the left and take the fight to them, get on the offensive. I'm really impressed with your videos and this petition. This is how it has to be. We can't back down because these people are not logical, and we need to protect them from themselves. I mean, look at the tolerant Jews in Sweden.
You don't know, last week I was at a rally. It was a pro-Palestinian rally against the so-called massacre in Gaza, where it's just Israel defending itself from 17 terrorists. But forget the facts for a second. And on the Palestinian, marching with Islamists, marching with Hezbollah flags, Hamas flags, with terrorist groups, you have the alt-left, the Antifa guys that don't realize, these are pro-gay, probably half of them are gay, or they're transgender. These are the first people to be thrown off the buildings when these guys take charge. And I'm sitting there saying to them, do you realize, do us a favor and just jump now?
All right, Avi, thanks for coming on the show, and keep us posted on that petition.
Yeah, will do, mate. Cheers.
Cheers, buddy.